Greetings, and welcome back to the podcast. This episode, we are joined by Mr. Chad Hayden, founder and CEO of Galatea Technologies, a software company based in Calgary that enables field operators and truck drivers with the ability to make optimal decisions on waste, water, or clean oil loads, resulting in 20% savings on trucking and disposal costs. Galatea makes it easy to create digital truck tickets, manifests, and shipping documents that automatically flow through field data capture and finance. Galatea's platform is used by over 50% of Canadian producers, 600 trucking companies, and hundreds of disposal locations. Mr. Chad Hayden has a background in engineering, working in the field and office across North America, and prior to Galatea, Chad was the sales manager for Newalta, one of Canada's largest waste disposal companies. Mr. Chad Hayden holds a petroleum engineering diploma from the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. Among other things, we discuss optimizing field operations, the rise of data centers and the increasing power demands, and how automation is helping energy companies. Enjoy. This podcast episode is sponsored by Enverus. Enverus is the world's largest energy-dedicated software-as-a-service company committed to helping customers close the gap between data and value creation. Enverus has been supporting the Canadian energy industry for over 30 years. Visit Enverus.com for more details. This podcast is sponsored by 5 Quarters Investor Relations. 5 Quarters elevates financial communications and market engagement strategies with tailored solutions designed to drive substantial value. With cross-sector experience and a focus on trust, quality, and integrity, 5Q can enhance your company's investor and stakeholder communication success. Visit 5QIR.com to learn more about 5Q's unique approach to delivering strategic IR and communications support. Good afternoon, Mr. Chad Hayden. Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate your time.
Trevor, I'm a huge fan of the podcast and honored to be here today.
For the listener, you are the CEO and founder of Galatea Technologies, but what is Galatea Technologies?
Well, for the listeners out there, I'm sure you hear my advertisement on every episode. Galatea Technologies is a software company that helps oil and gas companies better manage fluid logistics around waste, water, and commodities.
Why did you start Galatea Technologies?
Well, I got my start, like so many on your podcast, out in the field. My background's in field operations. I went to SAIT, took petroleum engineering technology. I've worked across the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin, a few years in Denver, a couple of years in Houston, across a lot of basins. And one of the challenges that I saw was how operators in the field manage trucking, disposal, moving commodities, water around. It was a hard thing to manage in the field. And as we scale energy production, I believe it's going to be a harder problem in the future. Started Galatea Technologies as a way to really take producers through a journey. And that starts with digitalization, understanding what's on your loads, what's on your truck, digitalizing truck tickets, manifests for regulatory and environmental compliance, leveraging that data then to begin looking at optimizing the operation, making sure every load goes to the best facility every time, and eventually automating a lot of the process that operators have to deal with every day, whether that's getting loads and data into field data capture, and then moving these tickets or receipts through accounts payable and receivable.
Things are going well. Recently, you guys closed a pretty big equity raise.
Yeah, we're having the time of our life over here. Local industry, Calgary, has been really receptive to our technology. I think we found a market need, and we've got some of the best clients in Western Canada using our software. We just picked up a couple of clients in the US. So we're really trying to figure out how do we move that knowledge and that operational excellence that we have in Alberta into other jurisdictions.
It's an assumption, but I'm guessing Galatea is after the hike.
Yeah, it's after the hike. So Mount Galatea is the tallest mountain in Kananaskis. And when I was trying to get the conviction to be an entrepreneur, I spent a lot of time hiking with my family, and it was such an awesome time, and I've got such great memories. And honestly, Trevor, building a business is kind of like climbing a mountain too. It's something that takes a long time, and it's a hard thing to do, but some of the best views come from the hardest climbs.
been up there a couple times. So I finally put two and two together.
Yeah, it's great.
Why did you pick the energy industry, to go back a bit?
Well, I come from the energy industry. I grew up, my dad was a plant operator at Methanex down in Medicine Hat. I've got aunts and uncles that have worked in the industry for their careers. And people in the energy industry, we've got such great opportunities in front of us. Oil and gas has been around for a long time. And the way I see it, a lot of the beneficial aspects of energy, we live that with our healthcare system, with our education system. I don't think there's many other industries that are in better position to help bring the world into sort of a better state.
Was the plan always to work in oil and gas, or you kind of fall into it? Or
I like building things and I like fixing things, and there's a lot of things in energy to fix. We've got these crazy complex systems of wells that feed into facilities, which feed into pipelines. It's this massive infrastructure project that really takes a lot of people to think hard about it and make sure that the pipe and takeaway is full. So it was a really cool problem. And the more I got exposed to it, I was 17 years old when I went and worked on a drilling rig. I asked a lot of questions and spent a lot of time trying to figure out how it works, really working my way back from the sand phase all the way to the sales meter. It's been this never-ending adventure of learning, and I think energy is such an awesome industry.
the nice thing about tech and software and code is that it doesn't require lots of capital to get a business going, but did starting Galatea require a lot of your own money? How did that happen?
Yeah. So the whole journey was for me to solve a problem. I feel like you should live it. And I had some experience living it in the field from the operator perspective. I actually went and worked for an environmental service company for a few years and got to see how waste and water and commodities was managed from their perspective. And then I went to a transporter company and helped them run a 40 truck outfit, and got to see sort of the pain and involvement that they went through. At some point, when I look at businesses, I move towards the businesses that are low capital, no field operations, no assets. I really like software because it gives you a way to come into a business, like you said, for low capital and really make a outsized value. So I like software. I try to stay away from hardware and away from owning assets. But putting the business together, we've raised capital 3 times now. First time through friends and family. That was really the people close to me that I had built conviction with. I think they gave me checks really as a way to give you the endorsement to go out and solve a problem. And I'm lucky that I was able to pull that off. And then our latest round was actually led by a venture capital firm called Staircase out of Toronto. So as we build the business and we de-risk the business, we get more exposure to different types of capital, and bringing some diversity to the boardroom table, to our strategy from somebody who's built an amazing business out of Toronto. Staircase was founded by Janet Bannister, who was an early employee of eBay, went on to create and scale Kijiji. So her perspective about marketplaces and interactions and scaling software and culture and people have been invaluable to our growth.
How did you spot the market opportunity? Was it kind of an idea and you just tested it, or you signed up your first client? How did that process go?
Yeah, there was, as you wander around the industry, all of my friends that are exploitation engineers or production engineers, you get this statement. It's called a lease op statement. It really talks about your operating expenses. And when I sat down with them and went through it from top to bottom and said, hey, what are you working on? What are you optimizing? What are you changing? We'd go through the list. We'd get to people, we'd go through electricity and power, we talk about chemicals, and that transportation, that disposal, that trucking line was always a tough one because it was a lot of transactions, lots of loads every day, lots of tickets. It's a really complex system to optimize. I like that. It was high on the lease op. It was one of the things producers spend the most money on, and it had a lot of opportunities to increase performance. And by increasing performance, you eventually lower that cost.
And you got your first client.
Yeah, and got our first client, a really small junior E&P that was willing to take a little bit of risk and work alongside us to develop an amazing solution. It's been fantastic.
So what was your value prop to those guys the first time? That I can save you 20, 30% on the lease op line?
Well, truthfully, I went out and thought optimization was going to be the best opportunity. So we went around town trying to sell, hey, I can lower that line on your lease op by 20 to 30%. What I failed to realize was producers like that control. So we actually pivoted the business to start with digitalization. And that's really digitalizing truck tickets, manifests, TDG shipping documents, these paper documents that are required on every load. What we do in the background is we connect that into supply chain data. We take the price books of the service companies that these operators are already using. We look at where they're going while they digitalize these documents. And in the background, we calculate what the price would have been to go to every other option in the market. So every load that flows through our app, we're actually calculating what the cost would have been if you went to 200 other facilities. That gives us a really good way to benchmark their performance. We then move to optimization, where when you fill out these documents, when you click the button to pick which facility you're going to, instead of that list being sorted alphabetical, we just sort it based on cost. We take transport costs, we take disposal treatment costs, we take wait times, we look into capacity of these facilities and help that operator in the field as they're shipping out these loads every day make better decisions.
How does Galatea make money at the end of that process?
Well, we're a software company, so we charge a small fee for every single load that we ship. And that fee is either digitalization, so taking all of these paper documents, making them digital, giving you a system of record so you can manage all this information, or moving it up into optimization, where we'll actually save a client money, charge a small fee, save a client a little bit of money on every single load. The value of having your data digitalized in one central system of record gives you a way to have a conversation about a load, a truck ticket, a manifest. We create that event log. So every single interaction on that load, whether that data then went into field data capture and production accounting, whether that data went into accounts payable or receivable, we now have a single place that everybody can have a conversation about a truck ticket.
Is the Galatea technology stack proprietary?
Yeah, we built that all in-house here. Our development team is truly one of the best in the world. One of the advantages of building software today is a lot of the technologies that we've built our platform on, they weren't around 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So we've built our system in the cloud on scalable infrastructure and architecture, and it really gives us the ability to move much faster than what traditional oil and gas software companies can do. And you learn some lessons along the way. And I'm sure it's the same way with building an oil and gas company. There's a lot of new technology that comes out that we're able to leverage because our system's designed on a modern stack. It gives us an edge to move faster.
A surprising implication that you notice when people sign up and start using Galatea. What is surprised to you?
Yeah, when you think about creating a system of record, for years, people have managed these processes with truck tickets, and they've been looking at stacks of truck tickets while they're signing them or going through that approval process. To have that data all aggregated and consolidated in one place, a lot of the people and our clients that we interact with have made these broad assumptions and saw patterns in those truck tickets or patterns in that data that they've known was an issue, or they're known there was an opportunity for optimization. To actually then be able to validate that and quantify that and put it somewhere that they can take actions, and then take those actions and start creating alerts, so that instead of managing these processes reactively, you can actually start to move to manage them predictively and start to see trends and insights and have conversations about them before they become an issue. One of the things, for example, that we worked hard on is really helping companies manage nominations and where their oil goes by truck. What typically would happen before our system is you get a report on the 15th of the month, and it would tell you if you're going to be long or short on nominations. You'd work with your trucking company and do your best to adjust that to try to hit your noms. We do that every single load, every single day. So now you can start to get alerts when a truck goes to a facility where maybe you don't have a nomination or where you're going to be high or short, really trying to balance that in the moment. That process enlightens our clients, and they're able to really think hard about how do they optimize these assets and make different decisions.
If you were to walk up to a established energy company on the street today, What would be your value prop at face value? What would you say to them?
Well, really, honestly, it comes down to the culture of those companies. We find there's a huge disparity in our industry between companies that have a culture for technology and companies that want to manage this asset the exact same way they have for the last 50 years. We try really hard to find companies that culture aligns with ours. And we believe there's a lot of work and energy to do to better manage assets, leveraging data and building data architecture and systems to move towards a more enlightened operation. So first step is really to find those companies. Then our value proposition is really simple. We're going to help you increase your regulatory compliance. We're going to lower your OpEx on one of the biggest OpEx lines. And we're also going to extend opportunities into increasing your environmental performance. What does that mean? Well, a few months ago, not so much now with all this rain, but Alberta was under a huge drought watch. So producers had to think hard about how do we find enough water to sustain our fracking or to sustain the completions operations. Our data set, the way water's being moved around in the field, we're actually able to redirect water loads from disposal to maybe go into a C ring or to be reused. So helping producers get visibility and insights into other options in the market that aren't just deep well injection. And I think that becomes more relevant in the future and other jurisdictions. When we talk about Texas, there was a Wall Street Journal report the other day about how the ground is sinking and swelling in the Permian Basin. We're pulling so much emulsion, oil and water out of the ground that it's actually sunk by 11 inches in some regions and then inflated by 5 inches in other regions where we're doing lots of water injection. So helping producers really understand load level, where are things going and what's happening. And hopefully in the future, we see more amazing technologies in water treatment. I know E3 Metals in Alberta is actually looking at extracting lithium from produced water. How do we start to move these waste streams and actually starting to create more circular economy opportunities where they can be a value add into another industry?
This podcast episode is sponsored by Conate Water Solutions. Do you need cost-effective water sourcing options to supply your next drilling or completions program? Conate Water Solutions is a specialized hydrogeology company focused on water well drilling, testing, and water management services in Western Canada and Texas. Contact info@conatewater.com or check out conatewater.com for more details. Where's Galatea busiest right now? Montney maybe, or?
There's lots of activity going around Dawson Creek. I spend a lot of time up in Dawson Creek working with our clients, but our operations extend from Northeast BC all the way out into Saskatchewan. And we help clients move everything from construction materials when you're building a pad to drill cuttings and mud to flowback and completions. When a well goes into production, everything from produced water, all of the waste from facilities like lube oil, acids for stimulation, all the way into remediation reclamation. So we help clients actually remediate, reclamate well sites, facilities, sending scrap metal to disposal, all of those aspects, and it keeps us busy.
I don't think there's any other Galateas out there, but if there is, how is Galatea different? And or how do you stay ahead of somebody who sees this as a good opportunity, may do the same thing?
Yeah, I think the biggest competition in oil and gas is a company called Microsoft with their tool called Excel. These oil companies for so long have built billion-dollar businesses in Microsoft Excel. Those Excel spreadsheets, I used to be the guy that would write the macros for companies. The way I see it in the future, more systems will come into place to help eventually, hopefully, get to an automation step where instead of having to manage a spreadsheet and put these transactions in a new row and manage it that way, we can get to a state where the operation will start to feed data into the system and we can manage by exception. So really that the system will start to spit out, hey, here's a notification when you need to pay attention. Here's the action that you can potentially take. Here's what you need to do. And that creates scalability. That allows you to operate more assets with less people and really get those people in the field and the office focused on what adds the most value, whether that's increasing production, optimizing wells, optimizing assets, things like that.
Nobody out there nipping on your heels.
Well, don't get me wrong. I think the energy industry has a lot of opportunity, and any entrepreneur should really be running towards the oil and gas sector as a way to help. But the oil and gas sector has a lot of barriers. In order to do what we do, you have to have spent some time in the field to really understand the nuances. I wouldn't be able to do what I do at Galatea without spending a couple years working at a trucking company, working for a couple years at a receiver. I had to earn that right to solve the problem. There's so many nuances, there's so many heuristics and variables in this equation. You need to understand them. In fact, you need to be the expert of them. Another thing in oil and gas too is we're starting to see more software developers at oil and gas companies, and I think that's fantastic. I think your data model at an oil company is probably one of the most important things. How do you integrate all of your systems together so you can extract the most value out of it? I think the energy industry is going through this renaissance period where we're inviting a lot of new technologies, new ideas, new concepts into the industry. We're certainly one of them, but I think energy as a whole is going to go through this period of massive digitalization and massive enlightenment. We're seeing it a lot on the exploration side of it. It's now starting to creep more and more into operations.
How do you stay on the innovation curve? Do you encourage that within the team? Or are you working on it yourself?
I'm just sort of this forever learner. I don't watch TV. I like to read books, listen to podcasts. And one of my secrets earlier on in my career, I used to work in the chemical side of oil and gas, and I would read patents from the paint industry. And I'd look at some of the chemistry that they were using and think about, is it applicable to energy to solve some of our problems? Let's face it, a lot of the really cool technologies are out there being developed. It takes somebody to do the research and figure out the opportunity to put that technology into an oil and gas workflow. We're seeing lots of amazing companies start to leverage gamification. We're seeing them leverage BI and reporting systems around intelligence. A lot of these technologies have been used in other industries for years. Oil and gas is sort of a laggard. So as long as you live life with eyes wide open, you're forever curious about technology, you can figure out lots of opportunities to bring proven technologies into the energy space.
What trends do you see affecting energy now, other than maybe Galatea, the Galatea platform? What other trends are you seeing? You kind of mentioned it with AI and whatnot, but what else are you seeing?
Oh, look at data center energy demand. When you think about my personal amount of electrons that I would consume, as soon as the GPT models and large language models started to come out, my energy usage would have bent from flat to exponential. I think it's hard as a user to understand the energy intensity of AI and really what the future looks like. If you simply look at how many chips NVIDIA is making, how many data centers are being permitted, if you look at even nuclear installations and the land being bought up around those potential nuclear sites, it's all data centers. I think society's energy demand is going to go exponential. And hopefully one day we find renewable resources or nuclear or other energy sources like that. But in the near term, we're really going to have to figure out, how do we scale natural gas? How do we scale critical minerals and mining? How do we scale these energy systems to support that future demand? I've read in a bunch of analyst reports, oil and gas companies are starting to look at power purchase agreements to data centers. When you think about what we do in energy, we've always had to have pipelines as sort of our throttle or takeaway capacity. Well, a data center is a fiber optic line, and really the input there is energy. We've become so good at producing energy. With the advancements in CCUS, we'll be starting to be really good at putting that carbon away. It just makes sense for a natural gas company to consider, hey, how do we start selling compute rather than natural gas? I think the demand horizon for compute and data centers is only going to grow exponential. We're just starting to get there with large language models. But as we start to see virtual assistants, robots, virtual reality, augmented reality, that's only going to keep that demand going.
Balancing growing Galatea with cash flow and revenues. Is there tension there? And how you manage that?
Well, I think there should always be tension there. One of the things that I did early on in my career was put a good board in place because I think governance is such a superpower that entrepreneurs rarely leverage to its full capacity. As a young CEO, I have a lot of things to learn, and I've put a board around me, a strategic board, to help me with very specific things in my business, whether that's strategy, capital, governance, systems, legal, put them around me to help sort of guide and advise. We just raised a round of capital. So we're really thinking about what does going fast look like? What does a 10x business look like? How do we strategically place bets and go out and execute on those bets?
Is the Galatea philosophy to generate consistent cash flow every year, or is it kind of a growth mode, or how are you approaching the business from that perspective?
Yeah, the technology industry has really glorified entrepreneurship and glorified big rounds of capital. I think of it as sort of the opposite. I wish companies never had to raise capital. But at the same time, in order to scale these companies at a certain rate, don't get me wrong, there's competition coming at us from all sides. We need to figure out how do we get into markets and penetrate that market before somebody else does. We use outside capital as a way to moderate that growth for sure. But the end game here is to create a sustainable free cash flow business. Technology is so scalable as compared to a hard asset, fixed asset business. We have that advantage. And we're trying to figure out what are those key metrics to understand to really help us tune the system and get out the other side.
Avoiding a dot-com bust, sort of high growth, didn't work out too well in the end. Maybe more like a Microsoft or something like that.
Yeah, I think honestly, it's around creating a durable business. Energy producers are looking for partners that are going to be around for a long time. The oil and gas software companies that I have grown to absolutely admire, they've been around for a long time. They're institutional businesses. Everybody uses their products and platforms. I think we're running a marathon, not a sprint. It's how do we create that durable business and make sure that we understand our internal economics so that we're around forever.
Has tech even scratched the surface on what it can do for oil and gas?
I think some companies are doing an amazing job. I've gotten to know a lot of exploitation engineers and production engineers, and some of the reports and systems that they've showed me that they've developed off the side of their desk in Power BI, Tableau, Spotfire, models, and Python are absolutely fantastic. One of the hard challenges we have in energy is really that data model. How do we create a system so that every software system that we use in an oil and gas company, when we talk about a well, it has the same features and attributes. If you can do that, then you can allow your systems to start to talk to each other, and you can create these feedback loops where if this happens here, do that there. We really have to think hard about how we design the data model at these energy companies, because that will unlock so much value. I think we're finally starting to get our heads wrapped around the value in that data, analytics and reporting tools, how it can unlock that value. The next step is really getting to automation. We're seeing lots of companies stand up remote operating centers, but really the end game here is to configure an asset so that it can almost operate itself, and it tells you where it needs attention and where you need to focus. That really creates the scalability that I think the industry is going to need over the next decade.
What excites you? What new markets? You kind of mentioned it without giving away your secrets. What are you looking towards?
Well, I think energy is such a great market for technology advancement. Oil and gas companies are becoming more hungry for solutions. We're getting bigger budgets. It's easier to get decisions, adoption in the market. Fantastic. I think adjacent markets like critical minerals, you simply look at copper futures and the growth we're going to need in copper to sustain like an infrastructure build out. They have the same fundamental challenges that producers do around shipping waste and commodities. I think that's a good opportunity we'll start to explore. The US market is always 10 times the size of Canada. I was actually in Denver at a conference a couple months ago, chatting with a gentleman, retired now, but he said, Chad, I've made so much money in my career going and finding amazing technology in Canada and scaling it in the US. I think a lot of opportunities, a lot of really cool solutions were developed here and grown to be billion-dollar businesses in the US. We're trying to figure out what does scaling look like here at Galatea. Not only do you have to scale your service, you also have to scale your software. You have to scale your people. You have to scale your culture, to scale your capital, all of these sorts of things. So we're trying to put wise people around us that have scaled billion-dollar businesses and can help us write that playbook or that roadmap to get into the US market.
Turning point in the company or memorable or memory you had so far? Does any stick out?
There's been lots. This whole journey has been quite the adventure, from learning how to raise capital, learning how to hire people, learning how to not to micromanage people. I've made way more mistakes and honestly gotten lucky with a whole bunch of things. And that's what's put us here today. One of my favorite dashboards, I plot our bank balance every single day and I watch what that one does. That tells the whole story of Galatea. It tells when revenue's been up. It tells when burn rate's been up. It tells when we've raised cash. It's such a cool thing to look back on, to see the adversity and the challenges and the pain that we've went through. A great one was BC. So the province of BC, we're the only solution that we know of in the market that has approval to digitalize waste manifests. In order to get there, I had to learn about politics and speak with lobbyists and figure out how that whole situation evolves. And it was such an incredible learning opportunity. We're lucky we got out the other side of it with really strategic advantage compared to everybody else in the market. But it took a whole other aspect of learning. I'm a software guy, an engineer. I had to learn about politics. What a crazy experience.
You get a sense the entrepreneurial spirit overlaps between tech and oil and gas. Do you see similarities between the two?
Oh, absolutely. They're both hard businesses. Oil and gas businesses, those boom and bust cycles. Tech goes through that exact same thing. And I think that actually creates hardened entrepreneurs. One of the advantages that we have in energy is that when companies go through periods of massive growth and then massive adversity where you have to make really hard decisions, I think that's a good thing. That's a feature, not a bug. I think that creates amazing entrepreneurs and those same similarities. We're coming out of a tech recession. Tech companies got hit pretty hard. You've seen massive layoffs, but I've seen that time and time again in my career in energy too. If you can take those best practices from what we've learned in energy and apply them to tech, the best oil companies have been around for years and years and years, and they understand what actions to take through those periods of growth and also through periods of recession. If you can learn those lessons and interchange them between oil and gas and technology, you'll create that durable business that'll be around for a long time.
Was it a difficult decision to accept outside capital?
Well, I think you obviously need capital to grow, but you get into an opportunity to develop a relationship, to put somebody at your boardroom table. I spent a lot of time raising capital, just getting to know people. I want to talk to people who have taken checks from investors and been at the table when times were bad, when times were really, really bad and you had to make tough decisions. I want to know how those capital providers acted, what things look like in the worst of times. So I spent a lot of time as we raise capital doing due diligence there and that understanding. And then I like to find capital providers that add strategic value. The checks that we take in any round, these capital providers have added a lot of value before they even got onto our cap table, whether that's through making introductions or helping us find key hires for our business. How do you find and build that team of just incredibly helpful people? Our biggest shareholder is the Natural Gas Innovation Fund. And that's a fund of a handful of upstream and midstream and utilities companies that put together some capital to help support the natural gas ecosystem and industry. They've been so generous with connecting us with their LPs and the people in their fund to help us have conversations that normally would be challenging, conversations with upstream and midstream and utilities about what's keeping them up at night, what are their challenges, what are the projects that they're working on. It's been super valuable.
Who do you look towards for advice? Does anyone stand out? Any companies, people, leaders?
Yeah, there's some amazing people that I've had the opportunity to put around me. The chair of our board, Rob Logan, is a fantastic entrepreneur, came out of Wall Street, really understood the capital markets, got into technology, helped do a couple turnarounds, worked for a few technology businesses. I really appreciate Rob because he's been in my shoes before and he's lived that. He's helped me focus around what does a great company, what does good governance look like. It's been absolutely fantastic. Another gentleman I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with is Mike Broadfoot. Mike worked early on with an oil and gas producer called Peyto. He exited a company called Solium to Morgan Stanley. So he's got experience in both energy markets and then also into scaling software and technology companies. And being able to take his lessons from both of those aspects and figure out, what's the strategy, what's the playbook has been super great for me to figure out how do I create my own operating model, my own playbook, my own culture handbook. There's lots of entrepreneurs around Calgary that are willing to spend time with sort of the younger generation and coach them along the way.
How important is being in Calgary? You could probably move the company, but why stay in Calgary?
Calgary is such an amazing ecosystem, that plus 15 network. I spent a lot of time in my job at different coffee shops and the connections that we run into, the people that you run into. What are you working on? Where are you at? We should grab a coffee. Those connections are invaluable. And it's something I didn't see when I lived in Denver or something I didn't see in Houston. When I lived in Houston, you could only have 2 meetings a day because you had to drive an hour and then get stuck in traffic. It was just hard to have that many collisions. I think part of the reason why Calgary is such an innovation ecosystem is because we share a lot of knowledge and we share a lot of challenges that we're working on as our industry amongst our peers. I think that's something that I haven't seen in any other jurisdiction in the world.
As a hands-on entrepreneur who is growing a successful startup in Calgary with a raise in capital gains tax, why is this a bad idea?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And my foray into politics is minimal. And I think Brad Wall on earlier episodes gave a really good answer to this one. But at the end of the day, you want to really support entrepreneurship. You want to support the job creators in the economy. We have lots of opportunities in Western Canada, whether that's through agriculture, commodities, critical minerals, uranium. We need to support these people and encourage them to build businesses here in Canada. Now in technology, you're right. It's way different than these commodity businesses because I can pick up and move jurisdiction tomorrow. It's not as challenging. I'm a Canadian. I was born in Canada, raised in Canada. I love Canada, so it's going to keep me here, but it's a real challenge. And I think we need to focus on really rethink our government and focus on what's most important. And part of that is building a strong economy, encouraging entrepreneurship, encouraging people and capital to take more risks and build jobs. I think that's super important to do. And I'm not sure the increase in capital gains tax is the right method to do that.
When you raise capital gains tax, it means entrepreneurs who create value and maybe sell their company down the road, pay more in tax, and it's disincentivizing them. Long story short.
Yeah, smart people will always figure out ways to manage a system or to manage those sorts of mechanisms. I wish we didn't have to spend that time and that brain power on that, and we could really focus on building the businesses for sure. Hopefully, the political pendulum always swings. I think the government of the future hopefully will look a lot different than it does today.
Maybe to wrap up the conversation, where does Galatea go from here?
Yeah, the focus is really around how do we build a great, durable, enduring business? How do we scale the culture that we've worked so hard to build? How do we scale our people? How do we find better people, continually better people? How do we make sure we've got the right capital to manage our growth? How do we make sure we find the right clients? How do we bring Alberta's long-standing ESG superiority and learnings to other jurisdictions in the world so that resource production, commodity production can be held to the same ESG standards that we are in Alberta? I think that's one of the biggest challenges and opportunities that we face here at Galatea.
If you want to save 20 to 30% on your trucking lease offline, any energy companies that are listening, check out Galatea Technologies.
You got it. Come check us out on LinkedIn, be part of the conversation. And really, we're looking for those forward-thinking companies and leaders that want to build a different business. Those are our people. That's where we see a lot of opportunities and looking for those connections.
Awesome.
Trevor, this was great. I really appreciate the conversation that you're having. I think as an industry, we need to figure out a way to have more of these conversations and invite the younger generation into engineering. It's glad to see the UFC's brought back their petroleum engineering program. I think it's super valuable and super important. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it. We can end it there. Hello, listeners out there. Thanks for checking out the podcast. Hopefully the episode provided some insights. If you enjoyed the show, check out trose.ca where more episodes are yet to come. You can also subscribe to the podcast where your token of support is much appreciated. Until next time, happy coffee drinking.